Hey, welcome to Healthy Time with Pierre Docs. Just a reminder this is for informational purposes, this is not medical advice. Please follow up with your primary care provider should you have any questions or concerns. Enjoy the episode. So, as you know, we get a lot of questions about what we do and our specialties. So, today I just simply wanted to ask you, what do you do? What is a hospitalist?
Okay. So I'm a hospitalist, which means that I work only in the hospital setting. Um, it's basically shift work. We work 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week. Then we have 7 days off. And essentially, what we do is we're in the hospital setting. We manage acutely ill patients that need care to bring them in from when they come from the ER, they get admitted from the ER physician, and we keep them until they're better to get back home or to a rehab facility or to some other facility that can continue to care for them until they get better enough to get home. And what we do is we manage all sorts of acute and chronic illnesses. We take care of mainly adult patients. Once in a while, we do have some younger patients, maybe 17 to 18, that we take care of, but we take care of all adult patients and we manage their acute problems. We also essentially quarterback the care that the patient gets overall in the hospital. So we put together a team of subspecialists that are needed to carry out the care that's required for the patient to get better.
All right, so Dr. Pierre, tell us, how did you decide to become a hospitalist?
I decided to become a hospitalist in residency. It was my last year of residency. Before that, I was highly interested in sports medicine and doing a fellowship in that. Um, but things didn't pan out with that as I thought they would for various reasons. And so I focused working in a more acute and critical setting in the hospital. I realized that going back and forth from hospital to clinic, I thought when I went to clinic, my pace was just so much slower. And I liked being in the hospital and getting kind of instant results from dealing with illnesses and not having to wait for a few weeks or months to get results or to see if somebody would get better based on this treatment versus within days of them getting better in the hospital. Um, and that's one thing I really enjoyed about being a hospitalist, although I do miss the continuity of care that clinic allows you to have.
All right, so what is most rewarding about being a hospitalist, Dr. Pierre?
The most rewarding thing about my profession is seeing the quick turnaround and how people get well. I think that's one of the best things to see. Somebody comes in really, really sick, especially like somebody in DKA or acute heart failure. And you see that person can be struggling to breathe or just completely comatose when they come in with elevated blood glucose. And to see that turnaround, to see somebody going from barely being able to talk or not even knowing what their surroundings look like to them waking up and being able to walk about and eventually leave and go back home to their loved ones. It's a great feeling.
Awesome. So tell me, what's at least one myth that folks tend to have about physicians that you'd like to clear up today?
I think one myth that people think is that we're unapproachable and we're very much into ourselves and that, we have an aura about us that is just, I don't see myself like that. I'm just the regular guy who just happens to be a physician. That's my profession. That's not who I am outside of the hospital. So I don't expect people to call me Dr. Pierre if I'm at Starbucks or in the grocery store. Like you call me by my first name.
That's right, I agree. That's one thing we certainly work we don't have to work at it. We just really focus on being down to earth and just being approachable at all times. What's one of the most interesting questions you've gotten from a patient prior to discharge? When you tell them, we're all set, you're better, it's time to go home. What's one of the things they may ask or share with you before it's
Ooh,
time to
I've
go?
gotten so many questions. One of the most common questions I get asked is if I'm single, or if
He's
which
taken.
which can be very uncomfortable at times. It's one of the most common questions they ask me is if I'm single, because somebody's usually trying to hook you up with their daughter or one of their friends. So that's one of the most common questions I get. It's
Okay,
pretty funny.
okay, okay, Dr. Pierre. We know that you're Dr. Dreamy, but on a serious
Uh,
note, what are common questions that patients ask you prior to discharge?
a lot of questions. It could be twofold. I can get questions such as, "Do you have your own clinic?" Because they want to follow up continuity of care with myself or other physicians in my role. But on a more serious note, most patients want to know what are the changes in the medications once they leave the hospitals, and that's extremely important because patients come in on ABC medications, and because of whatever may be going on, a lot of times sometimes we'll completely overhaul their medication regimen, and sometimes we'll add or take away medications. And that's extremely important. The discharge part is important because, especially for our elderly patients who may be going home to themselves or to a nursing facility, we try to ensure that we do a medication reconciliation, and we try to go through that in as much detail as possible. And then we have nurses also go over it with the patient to ensure that they know what medications they should take versus what medications they should stop taking. Because you have to remember that these medications are sometimes they still have prescriptions at the pharmacy for some of the medications that they were on prior to hospitalization. Once we discontinue those medications, we have to make sure that they know for sure this is not a medication you should be taking, be it that your kidneys can't handle that medication anymore, or uh, your heart function has improved where you don't need some medications, or your blood sugar is much better. And in our elderly patients, we don't want them to have extremely low blood sugar, so we may stop some of these diabetic medications. So that's one critical part of the hospitalization process is the discharge.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I will just add, oftentimes we will encourage you, if you're ever a patient or have a family member that's a patient, to just get a list, get those medications written down so that it's clear. So when the hospitalist, like Dr. Pierre, or your physician makes changes, then you can quickly be able to reference that note to say, okay, we're no longer taking this, or we started this. So you spoke a little bit about continuity and the benefit of that in having a clinic. I'm curious to know, how do you go about connecting with your patients and establishing that rapport?
Oh, that's a great point. One thing that I love about my job also is connecting with people in the hospital setting. So, yes, primary care physicians, they can connect with patient on a continuity basis, but for a lot of my patients, especially being in the state that we're in, being one of the states that does not have access to healthcare as readily as some other areas, one thing I see a lot is males, especially black males, coming into the hospital for the first time in their 30s, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, seeing a doctor for the first time in their entire life. And they don't just have one problem, they have multiple problems across the board. And what I do in these situations, usually I'll sit down with them and just have an open discussion. And you'll hear from them that somebody just told me that yesterday. They said, Doc, I like that you sit down and you talk to me and you kind of get to know me a little more than just coming in here and asking me a couple questions and then heading out the door. And so I try to build that rapport with them in that acute setting, even though it may be a short time. I think that's still important for them to see somebody who cares about them and lets them know, hey, you don't have to continue without seeing a physician or a healthcare provider. and I let them know what's going on with their diagnosis. I let them know how ways that we can turn this around or make this better. And one thing I 90% do is I say, do you have a PCP? Most times they don't because they're coming in for the first time. And I say, I will have you establish care with a primary care physician once you get out this hospital. And I ensure that they have an appointment to see a primary care physician. What they do after that, I can't guarantee that they'll go, but at least I'm doing my part to try and get them the help that they will need. And I just try to tell them and kind of break down the disease condition on a level where they can understand and realize that going to the doctor or getting medical help is not a bad thing, and there's nobody out to get you, and it's all just trying to get your health better.
So, thank you so much for sharing all of this information today. Where can we find you?
Yes, thank you. This was a great experience. Thank you for all your questions. I can be found at the hospital because I don't practice outside of the hospital from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But if you have any questions or concerns or comments, you can email me at pierredocs@gmail.com. That's PIERREDOCS number 2 at gmail.com, or find us on Instagram at pierredocs. Looking forward to hearing from you.